Okay, so welcome. Let me welcome all of you. Welcome to this first webinar that we are having today. We have organized a series of 4 webinars on the Earth Charter and ecological civilization. Today's event, again, as I mentioned, is the first of a series of 4 webinars that we have organized that are taking place between now, September and December. And our intention with this is basically to offer a space to exchange views and dialogue on what ecological civilization means and how the Earth Charter can serve to further clarify or expand our views on this. I am Miriam Vilela. I'm the Executive Director of the Earth Charter International, which has a beautiful education center that is located here in Costa Rica. We are hosting this as part of, with the help actually of some of our students from China. So we are located here on the University for Peace campus in Costa Rica. We have a beautiful forest next to us, and we are organizing this as part of our UNESCO chair on education for sustainable development with the Earth Charter, which has the purpose to generate educational programs and courses and research activities on sustainability, values, and education. So we have a particular interest in the knowledge sharing through this series of webinars and dialogues. This event, we are organizing it as a collaborative effort among several organizations. The Earth Charter International, the University for Peace, the Institute of Ecological Civilization, the Center for Process Studies, Space Center for Green and Sci-Teck and Development in China, and China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation that is based in Beijing, China. So we want to thank all the partner organizations that have helped us to put this together. Now, I have the pleasure to welcome and present our moderator of today, that was during his holiday, I think, was helping me to plan this during the summer holiday. So Andrew Schwartz, who is a co-founder and executive vice president of the Institute of Ecological Civilization. Andrew is the executive director also of the Center for Process Studies and assistant professor at Claremont School of Theology. And what I think is especially relevant for today's activity is that he is the co-author of the book that's entitled, What is Ecological Civilization? Crisis, Hope, and the Future of the Planet. So thank you, Andrew. Please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. Well, as she said, I have the privilege of being the moderator for today's event. A webinar that is really the result of collaboration between like-minded partners from around the globe, seeking to advance this shared vision toward a more sustainable and equitable world by bringing together experts for a discussion about the vision of ecological civilization, the Earth Charter framework, and sort of possible ways forward that we can move together as humanity. So some of the background that I think is relevant for this. So about 2 decades ago, years of international collaboration, input from visionaries from around the world, the Earth Charter was born, right? So it's a document that was drafted that's a vision of hope, a call to action, 16 principles, 4 pillars, which really, I think, provides a framework for conceiving the long-term well-being of people on the planet. At the same time, back in 2007, and then again in 2012, right? The 2012 China adopted ecological civilization into its national constitution, and then is mandated at its incorporation into all aspects of economic, political, culture, and social progress, made it part of a 5-year vision for the country. And I think that this call for civilizational change raises an acute awareness of the need for an alternative paradigm, for a new framework, for new values and worldviews. And we're now entering into this sort of 3rd decade of a new millennium. And it's clear that there's an urgency in generating intercultural, intersectoral dialogue about the meaning, the principles, the metrics, vision, and values that ought to drive humanity forward toward what we're calling an ecological civilization. So today's panel of experts are going to help us do just that. And we'll specifically be looking more at values and worldviews, religions and cultures, and the role that they play in helping to create and imagine an ecological civilization and shaping an alternative paradigm, and then sort of where we go from there. So I have three esteemed experts with us today on this panel. To my right, I know everybody's screen looks different, Mary Evelyn Tucker, who is the co-founder and co-director of the Forum on Religion and Ecology at Yale University. She's a pioneer in the field of religion and ecology. Anybody who studies religion and ecology clearly has read her. She's a specialist as well in Confucianism in China and Japan, and has published many books, including 5 on Confucianism, I'm told. So thank you, Mary Evelyn, for joining us. Next to her on my screen is Meijun Fan, who's the co-director of the China project at the Center for Process Studies. So I get to work closely with her. She's also program director of the Institute for Postmodern Development of China, and is formerly professor of philosophy at Beijing Normal University, where she was also department chair. Her area of specialty really includes Chinese traditional aesthetics, process thought, as well as aesthetical education. And she is going to be providing some great insights about what we mean by ecological civilization, both in a Chinese and in a global context. So thank you, Meijun, for joining us. Last but definitely not least, because nobody's least, is Karenna Gore. She is the founder and director of the Center for Earth Ethics at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, also an ex officio member of the faculty of the Earth Institute at Columbia University. Karenna has worked as a writer and she's author of Lighting the Way, 9 Women Who Changed Modern America. So I highly recommend you pick that text up if you haven't. Karenna, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us. So we'll be fielding questions from the audience throughout the course of this conversation. So if you have questions that you want to submit, whether you're on Tencent or Zoom or YouTube or Facebook, I think we're sort of on all of these platforms. Please submit your questions into the chat function, and then we'll make sure they get filtered in to myself and the panelists. Right out of the gate, I think it would be helpful to get a better sense of some of the shared terminology. And Meijun, you are a world famous thinker on ecological civilization. If you didn't know that, you are now, because I said it. And it's an international webinar. So this is a phrase that may be new to some of our viewers. It may be familiar to others, but there's sort of uncertainty on what it means because it gets used in so many different ways around the globe. So can you tell us, what is an ecological civilization?
Yeah, so this is a very profound and difficult question. Right? You wrote a book on this. Yeah. So people talk, about ecological ecology, ecological crisis, ecological culture, ecological consciousness, ecological sensibility, right? They talk about eco thing, ecological thing. Yeah, but in China, there is definitely there is a historical story behind this. So we're not going into that deep. But in China, so there are different opinion, definition on what is ecological civilization. But in summarize, so there is 2 of them. One is say so. Ecological civilization is kind of like competition to the modern civilization. So this means they think so the problem, the crisis, the climate change we are facing today, so can be solved by the advanced technology So we can fix it, no matter what's the problem. So we make, so we can fix it. So they are confident. So they put their faith on the technology, right? So, but I'm not agree with this, because I already see the limitation of a modern science, modern technology, which are the part of a problem. So from my perspective, so I think, so the ecological civilization, it's a definitely profound paradigms change. So it is the civilization which surpasses the modern industrial civilization. So it's a civilization which build on the philosophy of organism. It's a civilization which is sustainable, can bring a bright future to the whole planet. It's a civilization for the common good. So when I think of this kind of civilization, actually I have a chart I was sent to you after the webinar. So this is a civilization for the common good. So I can see, so there is a strong flavor of the constructive postmodernism. It's a strong flavor of a white-house philosophy. So when we hold the Climate International Forum on Ecological Civilization since 2006, so we build the school. So now Chinese people call climate school. Yeah, so because climate is a center of a process of philosophy. Yeah, so now move to Olympic, right? But so that is my sense about the ecological civilization. Yeah, so I'm humble. So I'm still developing my thinking. Hope all of the Mary, Evelyn, and Miss Gore correct me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. When I listen to you, I hear civilization is a word that's getting used because we're looking for some way to describe the sort of robust, comprehensive, holistic nature of both the problems that we're facing, civilizational challenges, as well as the solutions that we need, a new kind of civilization. You mentioned, you know, the new philosophies, as well as new values and worldviews, new systems and structures and paradigms, right? Rethinking education, rethinking economics, rethinking agriculture, all in light of, you said, the common good.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that it's hard to wrap our head around what exactly that looks like, because it sort of looks like changing everything in a sense.
Yeah.
For the rest of the panelists, I'm curious, where do you see this sort of civilizational scope coming out in your work, in your different spheres, even if the language of ecological civilization isn't something that you're using regularly? The need for deep transformation of the systems and structures and paradigms and values and worldviews that have led us to our current crisis, an interconnected crisis that's both social and environmental. Yeah, I don't know if I actually asked a question just now, but I think you get a sense, right? Like, say something about that.
Mary Evelyn.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Meijun and Andrew, for your introduction. You know, this is a big topic, and it's not the usual science and policy and law and economic theory and even technology that the environment has been working towards for a long, long time. This is taking a step back, and it is saying we need new ethics. We need new sensibilities. We need a moral force, and we've got to draw on the traditions, the wisdom traditions, religious and philosophical, around the world for this. So that's the contribution of Ecological Civilization. And Gus Speth, an extraordinary environmentalist who headed up the UN Development Program and founded NRDC, Natural Resources Defense Council, he said years ago, we've had 40 years of law and policy for the environment, but we need now a moral change. The Pope puts it in his encyclical, Ecological Conversion. So I just want to make a point, though, that while some of us have enthusiasm for this shift in worldview and values, I want to put a cautionary note here and say, like every idea, it can be used for ideology, it can be used for politics, for good or ill. It can be used within academia for discussions of power and so on and so forth. But I think our challenge, and this is the challenge, that this is a term that did arise in China. It has a very strong Confucian base, because the common good is what Confucianism was all about, both as a political system, as moral cultivation, and so on. But I think the beauty here is this term has larger traction around the globe, because it's saying we need, and some people would call it ecological culture, not just civilization. And that is, we've got to distinguish between this idea used as an ideology for politics and genuine, authentic change. So I just want to put that into the equation. So Karenna, maybe you want to also respond here.
Absolutely, thank you so much. I want to just first say that I'm really honored to be on this panel, and that my own work and perspective owes a great deal to the guidance provided by you, Mary Evelyn Tucker, and the decades of work you've done in this intersection of religion and ecology. So much respect. And also, the more that I learn, and I've been doing this work personally for just about 5 years, and the more that I learn, the more that I am awed and impressed by the Earth Charter. And so I want to say that that it's a wonderful experience to be able to return to this document and to the people that were so long, I mean, not so long ago, but certainly before I was inclined to be looking so deeply at the root causes. This document and this effort and community has been doing that. So, so thank you all, and I'm honored to be on this panel and in this group. And I would say that where my starting point is with the climate crisis and the very extreme and urgent circumstances of it. So there's often a lot of statistics that are cited for this. I think we all know, because we can now see the impacts, the wildfires that are now on the west coast of the United States, that were just last year in Australia. We've seen the stronger storms. We know that the Arctic is melting, Greenland ice sheet is melting rapidly. This is all something that, you know, as human beings, we understand that we might have cognitive limits, right? That we might somehow get inured to this and think of it as normal because it's now been going on for a few years. But in fact, it is so urgent, and we need to listen very carefully to that voice from Mother Earth, Mother Nature, from ecology in that sense. And we know that, so I was born in the early 1970s, and in my lifetime, half of the population of wild animals is gone. The deforestation, the stripping, the depletion of habitats, and of carbon sinks, we know has gone on. And then there's also been this trajectory of increasing the emissions, the pollution that causes these extreme weather events that I just described. So a couple of things that I find really striking as starting points for this is to think that, I mean, first of all, our choice is we need net zero emissions, and or it will be perpetually rising temperatures. That's it. So we can mobilize really soon for net zero emissions and keep it at 1.5 or 2 degrees above pre-industrial averages, meaning, you know, some damage, but somewhere close to what we're seeing now, and worse. Or we can not mobilize, we can delay. And then when we mobilize, we'll have to keep it at 3 or 4 degrees, and whatever tipping points are past then. So I just think it's very important in the discussion of ecological civilization to I feel called, at least, to center that particular climate crisis. And the other point that I want to make about it is that that I find really striking is that half of the emissions, the global warming climate change emissions that are in the atmosphere right now, have been put up there just in the last 20 years. So just since the Earth Charter, just since we have not only known the most about this, we've also had the most viable alternative in the form of renewable energy and technology. You know, I want to return to technology. I love, Meijun, the way that you brought that to the fore. It's a really important conversation. In some ways, the technologies are going to be part of the solution. But in other ways, we can't let it be a new form of denial that people are thinking, oh, don't worry, somebody will come up with something that's going to save us. You know, we have to be looking at the root causes. So because all of this has happened in the time when we've known the most about it and had the most viable alternatives, we know data and science is not enough. This is about belief systems and values and worldviews. And we know that the measurements and metrics that we're using in society, like GDP, gross domestic product, like stock markets, even like jobs reports, none of those are at all related to planetary health. In many cases, they are perversely related, let me say. And so I really, one of the reasons I'm so attracted to this work and to this conversation with you all is that there's this realization that we have to make change on that level. And so in my mind, and I'll just wrap up by saying, I often quote my friend, Reverend Henrik Grape of the Church of Sweden, because I really like the construct that he uses when he says that in every room discussing energy or environmental policy or any development policy, there should be 3 empty chairs for those who are most affected and least likely to have a say. And that should be for the poor and marginalized people of the world, for future generations, and for all non-human life. And when you think about it, if it's not just a matter of fairness, it's also, had those 3 categories been considered from the beginning, we would not be in such jeopardy in the health of the whole. So ecological civilization, as has been laid out in the Earth Charter, as has been laid out in different ways, but in Laudato Si by Pope Francis and others who've made the effort to start to articulate this, is living in balance and harmony and integrity with the laws of nature, not in opposition to them. Thank you.
Very well said. Yeah. You know, both Karenna and Mary Evelyn talked about the importance of ethics. And I think Mary Evelyn even said we need a new ethics if we're going to try to create a new civilization or new forms of human communities. So I wonder what kinds of values and what worldviews. Meijun had mentioned sort of a philosophy of organism. She mentioned constructive postmodernism. She mentioned Whitehead. And those are probably terms that the people listening have no idea what they mean. And that's okay. But I'm just curious, like, what values and worldviews are needed to ground this sort of paradigm shift toward a world that works for all? And then I think about the 4 pillars in the Earth Charter. So we have the first pillar, respect and care for the community of life, which is what I was just hearing Karenna articulate. We have the second pillar of ecological integrity, the third of social and economic justice, and the fourth, democracy, nonviolence, and peace. can these pillars, which I don't think should be understood as separate pillars, but sort of 4 ways of articulating an interconnected web of values of a core worldview, can these pillars provide a framework for building an ecological civilization, a world that works for all? What do you think?
Well, I'll jump in here because I was involved with the Earth Charter for many, many years in its drafting process from 97 to 2000. But even before that, the Earth Charter arose really around the Earth Summit in 92, when Gorbachev said, we need a 10 commandments for the planet and its future. And he and Maurice Strong and the Dutch government bonded together to help make that happen. And that was a long, long process that was very, very inclusive of all kinds of sectors. So those principles that you've just articulated, Andrew, come out of people weighing in from business, from women's group. We had the conferences at Harvard for 3 years, and every conference on each of the world's religions had a draft of the Earth Charter. And so that was, the religions weighed in as well. So I think there's no question, and thanks to Miriam's leadership and the Secretariat in Costa Rica, there's been a huge emphasis on education, on environmental education, which is so, so critical. And I'm at a School of the Environment at Yale, 120 years old. But what's missing there, even at this fantastic school, is this moral, ethical, spiritual values. And let me say this. What we have tried to do in surveying and activating, retrieving, reevaluating, reconstructing the various world's religions in the last 25 years is to say, many of the traditions have had human-God relations and human-human relations in the ethics, but the human-God relations and human-human, but the human-earth relations have not been foregrounded. And that's what we're trying to say. All of them have these extraordinary environmental ethics, and that's what we've got to bring forward. And so the Earth Charter, its special contribution is in the 3 key pillars that are ecology, justice, and peace under the umbrella of respect for nature. But this was the first document to foreground ecology, to say we can't have social and economic justice without functioning ecosystems. And we can't have ecology and justice without functioning democratic systems, as we see. So this was very, very prescient in 2000, I think, to have this integrated framework of ecological integrity, social economic justice, and democracy, nonviolence, and peace. And every word in that document has been very carefully vetted. My final point, and argued over for 3 years with the leadership of Stephen Rockefeller, who chaired the drafting committee. But my final point is one of the things that the Charter has as well is a cosmological perspective. And that is, I think, a fundamental difference and unique. So it says we're part of a vast evolving universe. Earth, our home, is alive with a myriad community of life. Now, to say it's alive is an indigenous perspective. To say it's cosmological in a scientific perspective brought these worldviews together. And in 97, when Gorbachev held up one of the first drafts in the Rio conference, the indigenous peoples were weeping because they could see their worldview included in this document, and that lasted right through to the final draft. So the large sense that we're in a universe, that this is a living Earth community, that humans are embedded in it and need to work, as Karenna said so well, in harmony with, in balance with nature. That's one of the many contributions of the Earth Charter.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I also want to give a plug for Journey of the Universe. It's a great resource thinking about this cosmic narrative, right? And what it means to be human in the midst of that story. We have a question from the audience that I think is helpful, and it's wondering about where you all think that leadership is going to come from to make this sort of dramatic changes that we need. And I want to add on to that specifically, the 3 of you are experts sort of at the intersection of religion and traditional culture, as well as social environmental challenges. what can religious wisdom offer to advance a transition toward a world that works for all? I mean, is that where some of the leadership might be coming from? Is it possible that religious voices will lead the way to this kind of Earth Charter ecological civilization future? I'm trying to find some hope here. I know it's.
Meijun, did you have something?
Thank you, Ms. Gore. Yeah, so I just feel, before that, I learned about Earth chart from the friends around me. But this time, it's really a great opportunity for me to learn the Earth chart more and deeper. Yeah, so Earth chart offer us so now Chinese government in 2012, so put the ecological civilization into our constitution. Yeah, so that is for China. But how about for the whole world, for the other countries? So I think Earth chart makes great contribution to this purpose. So I learned this time, Earth chart has 4 pillars and 16 principles. So that is amazing, So those documents was finished in 2000, right? So that is 20 years ago. So people already think about those kind of things globally with a global perspective. So that is definitely can offer us the a framework for ecological civilization. Under the first pillars, the respect and the care for the community of life. So that makes me think how we put those things into our practice, into our daily life. So this is not just Chinese people's responsibility. This is a universal responsibility. We are sharing this responsibility. So that means we need to change. So at this point, I think, so Ms. Gore's work on the Earth ethic is very important. So that means we are overcome the anthropocentrism. So that means we need to have a new perspective, new attitude to the animal, to the planet. So that means, do we need to change our daily diet? Yeah, in order to reduce the meat manufacturing. Yeah, do we need to change? Do we need to become the vegetarian? So under the second pillar, the ecological integrity. So last night, I taught at the COP Eco Academy. So I invite the Chinese expert, the Professor Zhang Gaoming. So he is a distinguished research at the Chinese Academy of Science. But he is not just pure research, do his work in his office, study rooms. He actually brought those his research, his study into his hometown to build the Hongyi organic farm. So he already practiced this in more than 10 years. So he has how do you say, he used the things he told me is that. So we don't need to use pesticide to kill all of the insect. We think that is not good, right? So he need, because he is an expert in the biology, so he used biologic pest control to reduce the pest. So that's it. He think we don't need to kill any insect. We need them. So we need them. We need other plant also, like other plant like Chinese herb, to reduce the pest. So there is no harm to the soil organic matter. So there is no harm. So actually, his yield is very high. So he is very proactive by using organic agriculture. So that means under this spell, so the modern industrial agriculture is the end. The monoculture, no way to go. We need to find a way. So that means we need to have a polyculture, human culture, right? And under the second, the third one, social and economic justice. So how about we can have like build the compassion city. So we can build the ecological city like Paulo Solari. Did he has ecological design, city design. So in Arizona, right? So how about we can have like now Chinese government has a huge project program we call like poverty alleviation. That means so we don't. So we want to give the poor people more opportunity to feed themselves, to not just live, but live well and live better. So that is
absolutely.
So that make me think Earth Charter really gave us the framework to how to build the ecological civilization in the practice level.
All right, sounds like our work is done. We solved the problem. Yes, the Earth Charter can provide a framework for building an ecological civilization. Now we need to put those ideas to work. No, that's really encouraging, actually, because I think what I'm hearing you say is this reminder that we need to be connecting theory to practice, connecting ideas to actions, because how we think about the world does affect how we live in the world, and how we live in the world affects how we think about the world. And these are not separated issues. But at the same time, I worry, and I do want to allow Karenna to get on this. I'm still struggling to find hope sometimes. Maybe it's because my part of the world's on fire right now. I don't know. But when you say the Earth Charter is a great document that had been developed over several years of international collaboration from many voices in different sectors, where each word has been carefully chosen, and it's the message we need. But it's also been around for 20 years. And a lot of the principles that are being articulated are actually not new. They're also embodied and embedded within indigenous traditions, from Confucianism and Taoism to the indigenous wisdom of the Americas. These ideas about living in harmony with nature, about living in peace with one another, I mean, they've been around for a while. What's the disconnect, right? Like, how do we get the ideas into action, get power to the ground? What's the missing link? And I think that's this question that we're getting from the audience is how we take these ideas and actually bring about systemic change for the long-term well-being of people on the planet. Not to dump that on you, Karenna, but I mean, you're welcome to respond to that or something else. But that's just something I don't know, I'm thinking
Thank
about.
you. Thank you. No, I think that's a really tough point, but a necessary one. I guess what I'd like to start by saying is, in answer to the original question that came through about where the leadership will come from, I want to speak from the context of the United States right now, because that is what I know. So I do think some of it's applicable globally. My fellow panelists are much more knowledgeable than I am on that score. But in the United States, there is a growing realization of issues around environmental justice that so I've talked before about the climate crisis, and the same activity that is the primary driver of our climate crisis, which is the digging and burning of fossil fuels, also causes ambient air pollution and water pollution, but air pollution, and these which can cause these health problems, obviously death. There's, I always hesitate to quote statistics, but the numbers of people that die worldwide of air pollution is high, and in the United States as well. The number one indicator of the placement of a toxic facility in the United States is the race of the people that live nearby. And there are much higher asthma and cancer rates. To take one fact, African-American children are 10 times more likely to die of asthma than white children in this country. This coronavirus pandemic has really revealed and laid bare many of these inequities. We can see the unequal burden that communities of color have, because the rates of contracting the virus and of dying of the virus are much, much higher. There are many reasons for that, including access to healthcare and racism and discrimination in every step of the way to get good healthcare and all of that. But one factor is the underlying condition of having a heart or a cardiac or respiratory illnesses underlying due to living in toxic circumstances. And so the people who, we have created a way of being in which we act like this pollution doesn't count, because we don't count it in the stock market. We don't count it in the GDP. We don't count it in the jobs report. It's not something that we're allowed to look at in terms of those measurements when people talk about how we're doing, what the health of our society is doing, how it's, and so it's as if it's invisible. Now, I'm from, I was raised Protestant Christian. I've spent a lot of time. There's a lot in the Bible about what happens when you don't pay attention to things. Everything will be made known in due time. You cannot keep a secret and put it under a rock, because there is a God's eye view. That is from my religious and faith tradition. The prophets are about that God's eye view. And I think that just to incorporate what you asked before, faith traditions have that to offer. Do not just look at the worldly ways of looking at things. Do not just look at that. Look at the view as an all-knowing entity would see it. So you can't hide anything. So I think we need to do that with those measurements and start to get better measurements. And we can talk about the specifics of that. There are different ones, Human Development Index and other things. We should be talking about biodiversity loss. We should be talking about rates of disease and suicide, epidemics of depression and anxiety. All these things should be talked about in terms of how our society is doing, in addition to things like GDP. But to just circle back to where the leadership will come from. So this thing of not counting these externalities and having all of this waste dumped in low income and communities of color means that there have been created what have been called sacrifice zones, people and communities that are so inundated with toxic pollution. And this is true in various places, including in Louisiana. Right now, there's another petrochemical plastics factory going in a place they call Death Valley, or Cancer Alley, I'm sorry. And the leadership is in part coming from those communities. So we are having in this country an awakening also around anti-Black discrimination and violence. This is slow violence. This is violence to poison people, to give diseases, to cause those death rates, to cause the degradation. And I think seeing that as that slow violence that it is, and then listening as these communities themselves are raising the voice, which comes in some ways also from their ecosystem, what they're speaking from, that is rising up. So I would say, you know, one person, a movement that is important to watch in this regard is the Poor People's Campaign, being led in part by Reverend William Barber II and Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris. And they're taking Martin Luther King's work at the end of his life, where, you know, he talked about triple evils of racism and militarism and poverty, that these are intertwined evils. And the current Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, adds it actually adds two more evils. One is ecological devastation. So they have put that along with racism and poverty and materialism as part of what is an intertwining system. And the other one that they put is actually religious nationalism, this false narrative of basically the kind of white Christian dominion theology narrative that has sought to objectify and erase people of color. And then just one last thing I'll say as another example is, of course, because you brought up Native or Indigenous communities. And so we've seen that voice coming more and more from the front lines resisting the build out of fossil fuel infrastructure. The big example is Standing Rock, where the Standing Rock Sioux and those that joined the prayer camp resisted the build out of the Dakota Access Pipeline. And one of the key things they did, I think this ranks up there with Earth Charter and Laudato Si, is how these people articulated what was happening there. Because they said, we are not protesters, we are protectors. And that is very important in shifting the context of how people see environmentalism in this country, because it's gotten caught up in this kind of culture war that if you're an activist or a protester, you're in a certain kind of group and it's all about that. We are protectors, we're water protectors, we're defending the sacred. And that was the other thing, is bringing in the spiritual and the faith into that work. So in answer to the question, I just want to lift out, leadership is coming from those front lines of people. And I again am speaking from a US context, but I would imagine some of that applies globally in ways that, I humbly need to learn, the intricacies of. But that's one answer as to where it can come from.
If I could jump in.
Please.
Yeah, so I just want to respond quickly to some of the important comments over on the chat. And of course we need politicians, so thank you for that point. There's no question. And then if the Earth Charter was done now, it would certainly be about banning fossil fuels. It would be, completely behind Bill McKibben's work and all of the things Karenna's just said. So there's no question about that. And I want to just return then to the leadership question, because I think it's important. I grew up in an apartheid America. I was deeply involved in the 60s in civil rights. I was involved in the first Poor People's Campaign. I went to college in Washington, D.C., very involved in the anti-Vietnam War situation. That's why it's so powerful that William Barber is bringing this forward with that integration that Karenna has just noted. So I think what we have to remember is what is progress over time, right? And where is leadership? We've just celebrated John Lewis and so on. We had a US system that didn't allow people to sit at a lunch counter, that didn't allow people to vote. We have a long way to go still on those issues. But let me come to the issues of religion and ecology. 25 years ago, that was not a field and it was not a moral force. And what we tried to do with hundreds of scholars and environmentalists and activists and scientists at Harvard was survey the world's religions from 95 to 98, published 10 volumes from those conferences and so on, and begin to establish a field that would be taken seriously within an Earth Institute at Columbia or within a Yale Forestry School and so on. It is still needs to be moved into these settings. It needs to be moved into theology schools. We have tried to work on that for 20 years. And I can tell you that it is beginning to have effect. So there's a force there. There's a field within academia, and the force with people like Karenna and many others, Green Faith and so on, have really moved this out in this activist world that she's just outlined. And I want to just maybe conclude these comments to say, what I'm trying to say is over 20 and 25 years, a lot has happened. Leadership is moving from the grassroots and certainly from some key religious leaders and academics in this field. But let me give two examples. Laudato Si, that's been referred to here, 5 years ago, Pope Francis issued the most important encyclical, I would say, of the Catholic Church, other than one on peace and so on that John the 23rd did. But that has been revolutionary. And why? Because he brought together, for the first time in a major statement like the Earth Charter does, he brought together ecology and justice to say that the people and planet, cry of the earth, cry of the poor, that came out of a book of a series we edited on ecology and justice. Leonardo Boff, the theologian from Brazil, that phrase is the title of his book. That has changed everything, the ecology and justice coming together. And let me also say that in another month, and actually in a few weeks, this Pope is also going to give forward another encyclical on human fraternity on the Feast of St. Francis, October 4th, which is going to be, I think, just as important as this encyclical that he's just done. And let me end with an example that I think is quite extraordinary, that certainly wouldn't have happened 20 years ago. And that's the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, which the Norwegian government has funded. The UN Development Program was the initial headquarters, now UNEP, United Nations Environment Program. But that is trying to partner with the indigenous peoples of the forests of Brazil, of Indonesia, and the Congo, the great Amazon in particular, including Colombia and Peru. So the indigenous caretakers of these forests, along with religious leaders in those areas who come from other churches, Christian churches, or in Indonesia from the Muslim communities. So this international, interreligious, honoring indigenous people on the ground is, I think, an extraordinary example of this moral force and a new worldview emerging to protect rainforests. So thank you.
Great.
May I jump in?
Yeah, May, please.
Hi, yeah. So when we're talking about leadership, which is a very important, yeah, I really, I totally agree what Ms. Gore and Professor Tucker say about those leadership. Yeah, so from my opinion, leadership definitely need education. Yeah, so when we look at our history of education, you see in the very beginning, those universities built on the Christianity, on the church, right? So, and the school of theology, yeah, usually like will take a longer time for the student to get their to graduate it. Yeah, longer than the law school, longer than the medical school, longer than the philosophy school, right? Why? Because we need a leader. So those leaders will come from those school with how do you say, the spiritual dimension. We need this. And take my tradition, Chinese tradition. Yeah, like Confucius. Confucius has a very strong focus on the education, moral education. Yeah, so that is how those intellectuals, so when they graduated, when they passed the emperor exam, so they will get the position in the court, in the government, in the local government. So they become the leader. So you see how in the history, how those leaders come from and guide the society. So based on this, so today the leader also need education, but this is not the education, conventional education we're talking about. We're talking about a totally different education, ecological education. So this education, it's not limited to the school, just or go to the campus, learn for 4 years, or get the PhD in more years, right? And found a good job, get high pay. So that is not the leader. So our society, our education, conventional education system, it's not going to produce the leader to change the world for the better future. So that means we definitely need ecological education. That is how we build the carb eco economy. So we want to do this experiment to see, because if all of those students graduate from those job training folks, the university, so how can they lead the society? So we need to the eco person and become an eco citizen and become an eco leader and serve the ecological civilization. Yeah, so, and this leader is not limited to a school. And this leader also can be taught by the teacher, by those worker, by farmer, those who has no teaching certificate, even by the kids, right? I remember when I come to US, one day I have a small talk with my son. So I say, you are stupid, right? So in Chinese way, so that is kind of okay, yeah. But there is like a 60 years old boy. He immediately responds me, no one is stupid. So even I was a professor, I'm a PhD, but I get a lesson from this 6 years old boys. So I won't forget for the rest of my life. You see, so everyone can be the teacher, work, farmer, and the kids, even the animals, the nature. So that is how our Tao Te Ching say, so mankind should follow the earth should follow the heaven should follow the Tao should follow the nature. So nature can be our great teacher. So then we got the new leader for the new civilization. That's it. That's my humble.
Super inspiring, actually. Thank you. Yeah, really wonderful. We've got several comments coming in online, and I know we're running short on time. You know, there's one thing that Karenna mentioned a little while ago that we didn't really bring up, and I think maybe it's worth taking a closer look at, and that's the importance of the urgency of the climate crisis, perhaps distinct from or in contrast to more long-term issues about sustainable and equitable ways of structuring human communities. And one of the questions actually coming from our viewers in China about the importance of sort of green energy, renewable energies, and offering that energy free to people as sort of a solution to move us forward. It makes me think, I mean, can ecological civilization and can the Earth Charter be both about the long-term well-being of people on the planet of a sustainable and equitable society, as well as addressing the immediate concerns and urgencies? Or is all that value worldview stuff just stuff that we get to talk about after we've, you know, drawn down the carbon and focused on the triage of our immediate crisis? Can we do both? What do you think?
Mary Evelyn, were you going to say?
Follow you. I'll follow you, Karenna.
Okay.
Yeah.
We absolutely have to do both. And I think people come through different doorways to this consciousness, and there are going to be a whole lot of people coming in through the doorway of wow, the planet's on fire. There's you know, there's yet another superstorm. Things are flooded out. There are refugees coming from around the world. Unfortunately, this is the reality. And to have laid the groundwork, I mean, I came to this on the later side, honestly, looking at the work of that's been done by Mary Evelyn Tucker and others, as has been mentioned, and to have laid that groundwork so that, you know, when you start to think, wow, this is such an overwhelming problem, we have to change everything, and we have to do it. You know, you can talk for hours and hours and hours about whether, you know, how much to emphasize individual choices that people make versus systemic changes in laws and policies. And of course it's both. But in any event, I think that to have laid the groundwork where you know, you can look at the Earth Charter and see words like regenerative and integrity and community of life as a phrase, and to understand what being more, not having more, is all about, to see that that nonviolence has been contemplated, you know, as a part of this, that the work to integrate, you know, human rights has been done, is hugely valuable and will always be. So we need to do both. But I do think I do worry, for instance, with the Sustainable Development Goals rubric at the United Nations, where it does so much good and it's a very important kind of scaffolding. But when climate action is one goal, it's number 13. And you can't approach it from the standpoint that, like, if you're achieving 3 other goals by building yet another coal mine, that you're okay ignoring number 13. Now, you know, we need to have some awareness, I think, of the priority and urgency that nothing be done that build out fossil fuels right now. We do not have that. It's pure insanity to continue on that trajectory. So I would say, you know, yes, we can do it all. And yes, this groundwork, and I am a firm believer in that value system, worldviews thing, but I think we need to get much more targeted and deal with power, the entrenched legacy, political and economic power that wants to continue to do this damage by building out this fossil fuel economy. And we can't let them. So I think, you know, we need to shift gears a little bit in the urgency of that, but also do both, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Karenna, and thank you, Meijun, for your comments too. You know, I like to think of this as principles, strategies, and tactics. Okay, and if we have our principles, which is the Earth Charter, by and large, if we have that as comprehensive and effective as it can be, that is extremely important. So I want to hold up the Earth Charter again to say we have now a declaration of interdependence for the future of our planetary life. We didn't have that 20 years ago, and it came out, as we know, of many years of inclusive listening, writing, and changing. It's an extraordinary document. And I know that Ron Engel is on this call and is eager to know how is that being operative or and so on within China. And it's such a good question, a really important question. And you know, I think one place it is with Du Weiming at Beijing University at the Institute for Advanced Studies. And he has been doing a conference called the Songshan Forum in Hunan province, a province of 90,000 people, where he does uphold a especially the principles of Confucianism, for transformation, for the common good. He upholds a notion of ecological civilization beyond its ideological uses, and he feels it can be very effective. And he also holds up the Earth Charter and was very much involved with us with the Harvard conferences and even with the writing of the Earth Charter from time to time, and Miriam knows him well too. So that example within China over the last 10 years of conferences, of discussions, of Confucian scholars working on this, and I also want to highlight again the Claremont work that's been done with John Cobb's leadership and Meijun and her husband as well. So I think the seeds are being planted. This is going to take a long, long time, but a declaration of interdependence is a pretty amazing document to move forward for all the reasons we've highlighted. Now, there was one other question, if I can see it. Oh yeah, so someone's asking also about religion and ecology and theological schools outside of the US. And, you know, we think somehow in the US, Canada, North America, that we're so advanced. South America, and Miriam could say this so well. I mean, Leonardo Boff is one of the great theologians in the world of liberation. And when he heard Thomas Berry say, you can't liberate people without the earth. And that's why he put this together. Cry of the earth, cry of the poor. So I would highlight Latin America as very much supporting the Earth Charter and very much understanding a spiritual revolution is part of this. And that goes into the theological schools. I'll just say as well, years ago, we were in Zimbabwe at a theological school. They were doing tree planting with the notion that trees are a way of celebrating Eucharist, a celebrating of Thanksgiving. Extraordinary. So I think there's things that we can learn from other parts of the world for sure.
And as you've noted, things that are now and have for a long time already been happening around the world, where progress is being made.
Yes, yes, indeed.
There's a lot more, I think, that could be said. A lot more questions that I have now percolating in my mind that, you know, weren't there, but listening to you all, I'm like, oh yeah, what about this? What about that? But I fear that for the sake of time, and especially those who are staying up late on the East Coast, that we should probably wrap up. This conversation has given me a sense of hope, actually, that we have something special in the Earth Charter that I think is articulating very much what people are describing as the goal of an ecological civilization. An ecological civilization in many ways is just the kind of world that is being described by the Earth Charter values and principles. But where do we go from here, right? How do we get started? What's the next step? What can people at home do to help participate in this movement toward a world that works for all? Any closing remarks that you want to say, advice that you have for people listening at home across the world right now as we conclude? Yeah, Karenna, why don't you go first? You're on my left side.
Oh, I would just like to say that it is, we live in this extraordinary time. I think we all sense it. It seems to be moving so quickly, and the interconnections that are happening just by virtue of this very technology that we're gathering on right now, and how that's been sped up by the conditions of the pandemic. There are forces that are greater than us at work here. We need to look very clearly at cause and effect, and that's something that I know, many cultural and spiritual traditions have teachings and sayings and sacred stories about basically cause and effect. That's what we need to really be looking at, is so that we can not just be at the effect of everything that's going on, including the impacts from climate change and the degradation of our environment, but really look deeply on that level of cause and act on that level of cause. And to do so together, we are able to use the best of these tools of technology and sense the fundamental oneness that we're called to realize in this time in so many ways. And so I really gain, great sense of what an honor it is to be alive right now, looking at you all on this screen and knowing that we're spanning the planet in how we're talking about this. And so we can feel that connection in a good way and go forward with some sense of faith that if we hold our intention and take steps to work hard, that good will come of it. So thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
And thank you for being here and contributing to that conversation. Meijun, closing thoughts from you. Share your wisdom with the people.
No, yeah. So my wisdom is very limited. That's the reason I need to continue to learn. Yeah. So I just feel like so honored to be here. And
that's what a wise person would say.
Yeah, learn more about the Earth chart, which is a great document. Yeah, and so when we I have this kind of things when I'm talking about my understanding of about the ecological civilization, and the people think that it's too big, we are too small. So what we can do nothing, right? And here, I would like to share the Zhang Zhai, the Neo-Confucius scholar in Shang Dynasty. He offers us 4 sentences to encourage us, to take action. So he said like this. So human being, we have this kind of great opportunity and also responsibility. So to ordain consciousness for heaven and earth, to set up the Tao for all mankind, and to continue last teaching of the seeds in the past, and to brought the peace to all of generations. So I feel so lucky. So I came to Claremont. So Dr. Cobb become my mentor, and I also have a great appreciation Professor Mary Evelyn's talk on the religion and the ecology, and also I appreciate the Mr. Gore's work on Earth ethic. And also I have a great appreciation about the Earth chart. So that gave us a direction. So now we have this kind of idea, beautiful idea. So we need to take action because time is running out. So if we take action, so we have hope. Otherwise, so we will be buried when the modern civilization ends. Thank you to give me this opportunity. Thank you, Angel.
A pleasure as always, May. Mary Evelyn.
Say, and again, I'm very grateful to all of you. Thank you for my fellow panelists and Andrew and Marian for arranging this. I wanted to just come back to Du Weiming. It's Professor Du, which is T-U, that's his last name, and then Weiming, W-E-I-M-I-N-G, one of the great Confucian scholars of our lifetime, a huge help at Harvard when he was a professor there in the series on religion and ecology. And when I mentioned Hunan province in the West, when he has had these conferences, the governor and many of his cabinet members of Hunan province of 90 million people have come to these conferences, and they are talking about a circular economy. They are understanding the implications of what we're saying now. So I just wanted to highlight Due Ming's work, and you can look up his website. And last, Andrew was kind enough to mention Journey of the Universe. Last fall, we did a program at the Yale Beijing Center on Journey of the Universe, which is a story of evolution that gives us the large-term perspective of this vast unfolding universe in which we humans are placed. And we had Confucian scholars respond to that, and 70,000 people watched it. So what I'm trying to say here is this coming together of a cosmological perspective from the sciences, all the sciences, and a cosmological and ecological perspective coming together from the world's religions is, I think, an extraordinary perspective to do what Karenna is calling us to do, rightly so, bringing together the knowledge and the action, the inspiration, if you will, and the perspiration. Because my biggest worry is burnout, loss of hope, despair. And that's why something like Journey of the Universe can give that hope, and also the humility that the religions have their problems and their promise. Ideologies, even eco-civilizations, problems and promise. We need to negotiate this in a very careful way. But I would love to end, because Meijun has highlighted this extraordinary Neo-Confucian thinker, Chang Zai. And one of the most famous statements of all of human philosophy and religion is his Western inscription, which I strongly urge you to look at. And he says, "Heaven is my father, earth is my mother, and even such a small creature as I have a place in their midst." And this notion that we are contained in a living, vibrant universe that we need to preserve for future generations. And he goes on to say, care for the orphans, the widows, the poor, etc. It's an extraordinary inscription that he had on his study, and I think it's a great source of inspiration for us in this work. So I thank you, Miriam and Andrew, especially for convening us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary Evelyn, and thank you all for being here, panelists and audience members. This has been a truly inspirational launch to our dialogue series. So fortunately, the conversation doesn't end here. You're like, wait, no, but I'm tired. No. So recordings of this dialogue will be available on the Earth Charter YouTube channel as well as the Facebook page. So please spread the word, keep the discussion moving forward. I also want to invite you to join us for the next installment of our dialogue series scheduled for October 15th, where we'll continue to explore this relationship between Earth Charter and ecological civilization. Miriam, would you like to close us out?
Well, just by saying that sometimes we have an idea, and it's so nice when it crystallizes. So the idea has been going around for some time to offer this space for intercultural exchange and dialogue on what does it mean, ecological civilization. And I'm very happy to see this, and I want to thank each one of our guest speakers for your wisdom and your willingness to join us today. And I also want to thank all those who joined us through YouTube or Facebook, and especially because thanks to technology, we can be being live streamed to China through Tencent Meeting. So I want to thank all those who are making this unique opportunity possible. Thank you. And see you on the 15th of October when we have our second webinar on the same theme, but with the three new speakers, Fritjof Capra, Jeremy Lentz, and Alice Huge, who are going to join us for the second webinar. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.